I want to talk about the show Shrinking on Apple TV. It shows the main character, Jimmy, as he's grieving his wife, but also as a mental health therapist. And he's hurting and he's handling things in an unhealthy way. He's abusing alcohol and drugs and hiring prostitutes. He's not on his game as much as a therapist, such as being late to sessions and just being uninterested or not as focused. And I think it does a good job of showing that counselors are people too. They go through their own problems and mental health issues. And if they don't take care of these things, they're going to get in the way, and they absolutely will, to this level or at least some kind of level, and it won't let them do their job as efficiently. It shows him in the first time meeting with Grace. He loses his anger and tells her that she needs to leave her husband. They've been doing this for over 2 years and haven't made any progress. And he does it even in a threatening way by saying, if you don't leave your husband, I'm going to stop meeting with you as your therapist. And it's a bold move, and I think sometimes as therapists we do need to take risks, but this one is completely unethical, telling a client what they have to do and especially making that threat. And that anger that kind of comes up just shows that he's not in the best place to be a counselor, and it's getting in the way. He goes to the break room afterwards and talks with Paul, who's played with by Harrison Ford, and they talk about compassion fatigue, which is a real thing and can lead to burnout and affect how counselors are able to do their job. However, I also noticed when Paul says that, he kind of comes across numb and just says, when you have compassion fatigue, you have to listen and just stay non-judgmental, which is true. But I think there's also other things to address too, like dealing with your own things, maybe seeking counseling yourself. So maybe that kind of suggests that Paul has gone through that or is going through that, just that compassion fatigue because of how he comes off. When working with Sean, the veteran that Jimmy's working with, he, in the first session or two, he comes off uninterested, tired, he yawns, and it just kind of is starting to affect his work there. Also, when he gets home, he has a flashback of his wife, which kind of suggests trauma and that things are going on in his own life just because of that grief, which is a real thing, but it's getting in the way and it's impacting his ability to be a therapist. He even sees his best friend at the gas station and avoids him. Another thing just suggesting that there's a lot of turmoil and a lot of stress and problems going on in his own life. The next day, he calls Paul, and Paul kind of talks him through some steps to connect with Alice, his daughter, because they're kind of not as close since Jimmy's wife died. And it kind of shows that Paul's kind of mentoring Jimmy and trying to pour into him, which I think is awesome, because that's so important in counseling, is to have people that can mentor you, or groups or other counseling opportunities to grow and learn and continue to develop your skills, because it can be very isolating as a field if you let it. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that continues, to see if Paul continues to mentor Jimmy, because there's a lot of growth that needs to take place because Jimmy really is hurting. Boundaries continue to get strained throughout the show. Grace calls Jimmy in the middle of session to let Jimmy know that she left her husband. Again, that's just kind of unethical. I, as a counselor, multiple times felt a little anxious just watching how much boundaries were being crossed throughout the show. Sean calls Jimmy when he almost gets in a fight, and Jimmy even answers the phone like, hey man, just showing that they're almost more friends at this point, or there's some boundaries being crossed. And then Jimmy even tells Sean some things about his wife passing away, just crossing some boundaries there. Self-disclosure can be good and really powerful when used appropriately, especially if it's not used that often. When it is, it can be powerful, but it's kind of starting to blur that line and not be healthy in those ways. I think it does a great job, though, with Jimmy connecting with his clients, showing that Jimmy's learning from his clients and growing from his clients, because that's such a good thing. Myself as a counselor, I try to learn from my clients and their experiences and the relationships I have with them all the time. They're just going a little too far. Jimmy's kind of crossing some boundaries, which we have to be careful with. So it'll be really interesting to see where they continue with that, if he's going to continue to be that psychological vigilante, if Paul and Jimmy are going to continue to have that mentorship relationship, if they're going to help each other out. But overall, I think it was a really good show, just showing that counselors are people, they go through their struggles, and it makes their job hard when they're not taking care of themselves. So we'll see where that continues, and I'm really interested about that.